Afternoon, everybody. My name is Jenny Rajab. I work for TAQA AI. So we're an AI company involved in developing AI technology for Africans by Africans. And we focus a lot on natural processing products in African languages. We feel it's very important that we're included as part of this AI technology wave, and that our languages and that our cultures and stuff don't get lost, and that we are part of this conversation. So that's what I'm about.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us, Jane. Dr. Glinam Shope, I'll come to you as well. Please introduce yourself and let us know what work you do in this space. You are muted, Ma.
Sanibonani.
Ma.
Yeah, siyajabula ukuba nani ngisadidekile kancane ukuthi masikhuluma ngeilimi zesintu sikhuluma ngazo ngesingisi kuyangishonisa lena ngidideke ngempela nokuthi uma ngabe sithi sihlonipha ilimi zesintu ngalolu suku olunzima kanjena futhi kwashona abantu eSharpeville angazi ukuthi ku celebrateani lapho uhulumeni ophethe manje wakhetha ukuthi kube i-Human Rights Day kuze kuzofakwa a bit of kuthiwa yintoni kuthiwa yini konje i-sanitizer kuthiwa i-sanitizer yeah. So ke bathi bayana bathule basusa iphunga nje kulento ngokushona kwabantu eSharpeville. So ilanga laseSharpeville lela namhlanje. Masikhuluma ngeilimi zesintu, when we are talking about Human Rights Day, I hope during this conversation we're going to hear some African languages, not about them, but to hear the African languages. Otherwise you don't need me in this panel. Ngiyabonga.
All right, thanks, Ma. Thanks, Ma. And that's a very good point. I think the panel is mainly in English because of the fact that we do speak different languages, and for us to just increase the access to the information that will be discussed, that we actually do have some hearing of each other there. But you are more than welcome to respond in whichever language you choose to respond. I think there's definitely no limits on that. Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Lorato wants to come in. She has not been let in. Lorato Trok, she's still outside and she has not been let in. If you can let her in, she's been on standby for quite a while, even before we started.
Thanks, Ma. Thank you, Ma. Hi, Tapelo. Welcome.
Dumelang. Again, Tapelo Ntite. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Botlhale AI. And we help businesses engage with their customers in languages that their customers understand and trust. We do this through AI-powered natural language processing. And we do this because we realize that we live in a time and age where digital services are very important. They're a big part of our daily lives. But people are still forced to use these digital services in English and European languages. It's quite unacceptable that you can't open a business account online in South Africa today if you don't speak English. You can't open a bank account online if you don't speak English. So really, people are being excluded from the formal digital economy. And our work at Botlhale is ensuring that we can really localize these digital services and ensure that people can engage with businesses and service providers in languages that they choose. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. That's very important work. Thank you very much. And then Lorato. Hi, welcome. Please introduce yourself and the work that you do.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Apologies. I think I used the wrong link. I got through the same link that you said we shouldn't use. That's why I was standing out. My apologies.
No problem.
So, hi, everyone. My name is Lorato. I am an author. I write children's picture books, and I also write young adult biographies. I write both in Setswana and English, and I am an advocate for African languages, the use of African languages in all spaces, not only academia, but mostly academia, because, you know, our children, when they go to school, they are forced to abandon their languages. There's been a lot of times where parents have been told that for the child to be able to speak English at school, the parents should speak to them English at home as well. And that's why we end up with a lot of children not knowing their own languages because the parents are under pressure. So for me, it's like children are able to learn all those languages at once. And I mean, we live in a multilingual and multicultural country. We cannot just have English and Afrikaans as languages of the country when 81% of the population is not English and Afrikaans. So that's kind of the work that I do.
All right, thank you very, very much for that. And thanks also for joining us. And then before I introduce the last panel member, my name is Tshepang Kgoboko, and I am part of the TAQA team. And I am the T in TAQA. If you didn't know, TAQA is actually from the initials of the founders of the business. So that's where the name came about. So I don't know if people knew or if you didn't know about this, but yeah, let us know in the chat if you are aware that that's what TAQA actually means. So I am in TAQA, and then I work with Akholiwe Fecha as well as Aphendule Ngola, who will be in the background of this particular session. So they are the A's in TAQA, so they will wave maybe a little bit. And then our fifth and last panel member is Tawe, the Q in TAQA. And I'll let him introduce himself, and then he'll also talk a lot more about what we do at TAQA. Hi, Tawe, welcome.
Hi, Tshepang, and hello to everyone who's joined us here today. Hi to the fellow panelists. Hi to everyone in the room. But hi guys, my name is Tawe Bula, and I'm a co-founder of TAQA. And what we do at TAQA, we build digital libraries of children's books in all the official 11 spoken South African languages. And these books we're building and build in video book format. So it's an integration of an audiobook format of a book with the integration of audiobook format with the book with the illustrated format. It's not quite a cartoon, it's still a still, but we integrate it such that a child can hear the word. If Ingonyama on the screen, you can hear Ingonyama in your ears. You can see the word Ingonyama on your screen, as well as the still of Ingonyama legu. And the TAQA, we do this for a number of reasons. I think primarily and firstly, to tackle just a reading crisis in South Africa by helping create greater access to reading, ensuring that one, there's a larger pool of books in African home languages. So here we're working in the tradition of Umamu Namshope and Umamu Lorato, who've been writing in African home languages, and trying to create a platform that can pool that type of content together, create more of that content, and give children access to that content, understanding that children learn better how to read within their African home languages, or rather just within your home language in general. That's what research suggests. And secondly, that you're better able to learn a second language. So for example, the mother tongue-based bilingual education programs in learning to your own language and understanding linguistic concepts in a language that's reinforced in your everyday context, it also makes it easier for them to pick up, say, a second language, whether that's English, whether that's more South African languages. So we're doing it to help South African children learn how to read, doing it to better represent African languages and African histories, and also create a platform for writers, authors who are writing in African languages, to come together and we can pool the content on the platform. But yeah, this is us, this is TAQA, and that's me as Ukayobula.
Thank you very, very much, and for introducing the business very well. To all the people that are joining in on the call, please let us know where you are tuning in from. We just want to see geographically where this webinar is happening. But yeah, just to get maybe into our first theme, which is access. I mean, a lot of the work that the panel members do here has to do with access. So we just want to touch a little bit on that, and maybe Thapelo, you can just let us know, like, what is the importance of access in the development of a country and its people? The work you do has a lot to do with access. So why do you think that's important as we develop the country to make sure that there is access?
Yeah, I think, really access is at the core of the work that all the panelists do. And for us specifically, it's getting people to really properly participate in the digital economy, because the digital economy is growing quite fast. I mean, the World Bank stated that, over the past 10 years, the digital economy has grown, twice as fast as the physical economy. And it's sitting at around about 15% of the global GDP. But at the same time, people who can't participate and access this economy are losing out, right? So ultimately, the country's losing out on economic activity. But beyond that, right? So access to knowledge, access to information, access to opportunities, access to knowledge. So really, in order for people to be properly free, they should have access to all of these things, right? And language for a very long time has been a barrier to all of these things. I know people in tech specifically will speak about connectivity and infrastructure. Yes, that's important. But if someone is connected, has the infrastructure, but can't necessarily engage with the information that's shared, it's somewhat pointless, right? So I think language plays a really, really big part in ensuring that people are really free in the time and age that we live in. I think we can't say people are free if they can't fully exercise or be fully active in the digital space.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you make such a good point, because it's one thing to make the tech available, but if you can't engage with it, then it's as good as not actually being available to you. And I know this definitely does then beg the question to say, as we are then innovating, how do we bring in our African languages? So for example, you'd need to kind of create the terms for, like, as we expand into AI, in Sesotho, if I was to try and explain to my grandmother, what sort of terms do I use in AI, and how do I then develop the language to make sure that it is, I don't want to say incorporated, because it sounds like we're including it, but that we are actually expanding the access to the tech. And I mean, Jane, at Lelapa, you do a lot of work with regards to making sure that the African languages as well as the AI are equally developed. How then do you ensure that you are still at the cutting edge of the development of technology, while also having to do the heavy lifting of developing the languages and essentially what work needs to happen behind the scenes on the space of language?
Thanks. So at Lalapa, we do pay a lot of attention to the kind of data that we use. Obviously, in these settings, especially with African languages, they are quite low resourced. So a lot of our effort goes into creating these data sets that are fit for purpose, that do take into consideration native speakers of the languages. We involve linguists to make sure that it's culturally relevant, to make sure that the data is of very good quality. And then not only that, we also make sure that we are creating these models, we are being intelligent about the models that we create. You know, often it's very easy to take something that was developed by the West and like slap it on top and make it fit for purpose, but that is not what we need to do. We need to be clever about reimagining how these models are created. How do we fit them to our languages? Because they're very different to English, for example. So that's kind of how we approach that problem, being very intentional about how we do things and what data we create.
All right. That sounds very good. Yeah, Tapelo, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to add on developing the language itself as tech develops. I don't think it's necessarily a technology issue. I think it's an issue, you know, across various industries. And what should be happening is, you know, we should have policies and investment going into intentionally developing terms for these things, right? Because that's also an investment into the education space. Because what's this? If there's a new term, like say derivative is something new, right? It comes from somewhere. It's not an entirely new word, if I can put it like that. And the same can be done for our local languages. Similar to how new terms are introduced in English, the same can be done for local languages. And yeah, that's how we stay cutting edge. Very similar to what Jen said. I think really looking at what's happening in academia, in the research space, but applying it appropriately for the local context.
All right, thanks for that. Do you think then there's some work that needs to happen on a policy front to kind of institutionalize that sort of development or the introduction or the creation of those terms? And do you think currently the policy supports that? I don't know if you've come across those kind of challenges, Tapelo.
Look, I don't think it's being done to the level at which it should be done. I know there's a couple of universities PhD students looking into something like this, finding models to develop such terms. And in terms of policy, I think, South Africa is very interesting we have a lot of good policies, right? It's the implementation where things go south. And even with language policies, the policies are there, but there isn't a lot of effort put into really applying the policies, just like, the right to learn in your own language. Apart from one single demographic, no one really has that opportunity. The policy is there, but it's not being applied.
All right, okay. So just then moving on, I mean, we cannot talk about the development of our languages without touching on decolonization. And I believe that part of decolonizing would be exactly that, to bring our African languages in the forefront. So Kawe, how do you think as a nation we are doing when it comes to decolonization, and what does decolonization mean to you?
All right, thank you. Thank you for that question, Sepi. I think just to maybe first start on the prior question about the development of African languages and terms, and I'll come back to the decolonial bit, Sepi, and thanks for the question. I wanted to post a link just in the chat to the Pan South African Language Board, which does that work, but I would very much agree with Tapelo and Jen in the sense that the work's happening, but not nearly at the extent that it ought to be, and not with the kind of investment that it ought to be. But okay, Sharp, to come back to the side of decoloniality, I think Umamugcina Mhlophe may have in her introduction, just by kicking off, I think in terms of decolonization, it's very important to understand that amongst the tools of the colonizer, it wasn't just, the cannon to force the kind of body, if you will, to bow down. But there was also a cultural imperialism, which sought to conquer the spirit and the soul of African people. And I think amongst the ways that we can resist the cultural imperialism, or amongst the way in which the cultural domination, was occurring, was linguistically, right? Was to ensure you're trying to make us believe as Black people that we're a people without a useful history, without a useful language, a people who are secondary to a kind of superior language or a superior culture, that of Europeans. And so just to understand that part of the colonial project was to destroy who Africans are in an identity sense, in a spiritual sense, in a language sense, in the ways we think, etc. So I think then in our resistance to colonialism, it's very important that we insist upon, our African languages. When we speak to one another in the work we do as kolweni, so in the literature that we're writing, I think, it's a huge part of the anti-colonial struggle, or the decolonial struggle, if you will. In terms of how we're doing, I think there's work being done. So for example, in education, particularly in the Eastern Cape, we've had the piloting of mother tongue based bilingual education programs, and it's in every single district, and there's at least 50 schools in each district that are learning beyond just grade 3, which is the standard. I think for most of the country, you can learn in isiXhosa or your African home language up to a grade 3 level, at which stage you have to, although it's allowed by the Constitution, but in reality, due to constraints in terms of the learning materials and SGB voting, you have to switch to English and Afrikaans after grade 3. But in the Eastern Cape, that's been piloted for almost the last decade or so now, and it's now being spread across to different provinces that, we have this mother tongue-based bilingual education program that has run well in Eastern Cape, produced better reading results for children, produced better speaking results in both English and, that home language. So I think there's work being done, but it's not extensive enough, but I would at least congratulate that work. If we come to the world of stories, which is primarily work by TAQA, we understand that less than 10% of African of children's books are written in African home languages in South Africa, and we have some stalwarts here in Lerato and Dr. Trina who do that kind of work. But again, we need it far more extensively, because if there's less than 10% being written, if we're speaking then in terms of access to that kind of literature, it's not going to get to the majority of South Africans won't necessarily have access to reading materials in their own African languages, and so I think we're we're very far from that. I could go on to speak to other worlds of decoloniality, but I'll stick just to language and the world of stories and education. And there's other levels to it. So I think we've made maybe a 15% dent, and I think we're doing well to even persist. So shout out to Okoko Abaligcina in the most difficult of circumstances. But I think there's so much more work. We're far from the conclusion of a decolonized South Africa. Let me stop there.
Thank you. Dr. Gcina, I saw you were nodding quite a bit there. What are your inputs around how far we are with the decolonial project and the activities that have been done and what still needs to be done?
Mangingathi kuwena say decolonial in isiXhosa, Setswana, Tshivenda, what would you say? This term alone, decolonial, decolonize, decoloniality. I don't know how you would translate it, but I'll leave that. I'll park that one on the side. If we talk about respecting our mother tongues, we have got to speak them. And here at Gcina Masiko, I'm the director of Gcina Masiko Arts and Heritage Trust. And our main project as well is Nozincwadi, Mother of Books Literacy Campaign, which started in 2001. That's how we were able to zigzag all 9 provinces of South Africa. And every province we visit, we don't only donate good, fresh and new books, but also make sure that we bring books that are predominantly written in that language. If we are in the Free State, if we are in Mpumalanga province, if we are in it doesn't matter where we are. When we arrive there, go Northwest, we have to bring the books that are also including the mother tongue of that province. And another thing, ukuthi masikhuluma ngokuthi ilwimi zethu, our languages are spoken, that's the wealth. Understand? That is the wealth. That's our second skin, your mother tongue. And when we are saying we want to be decolonized, and hardly anybody in the spaces that matter, I'm a CEO, I'm a politician, I'm a leaders in different spaces, ever speak African languages. And then there are people who they're eating hot potatoes when they try to speak English, but they don't switch over to their mother tongue. But he has I'm speaking isiXhosa, and so what's wrong with that? Why is it okay for China kufika khuluma isiShayina sakubo? Wakamusa uVladimir Putin ekhuluma isiNgisi selokwazalwa wena. All of those things, it's up to us to elevate our languages again the way our parents did. With all the books that are in this house, a young man said to me, I was in America, you love books so much. Do you have a wordarium at your house? Who's ever heard of a wordarium? Only a child would come up with a word like that. Kune gymnasium, kune herbarium, what, do you have a wordarium at your house? Say, yes, sir, I got a wordarium at my house because I've got so many books. But who started? Who's the backbone of all of those books? I went to a Xhosa speaking high school in the Eastern Cape, and my set work for matric was Ingqumbo Yeminyanya by A.C. Jordan. That is the book that started the backbone of all the books I've got. I've got lots of books in this house in different languages and from different cultures and backgrounds. But A.C. Jordan, he's the backbone of all the books that are here. And that is why, again, Eastern Cape, 17 and 18 of April, you just celebrate him, to shout his name out loud, because South Africans have got this tendency of forgetting people who matter. When last did you hear somebody saying, Eskiampahlele? These are people who loved their mother tongues. Can we just go ahead? Or Solplaatje. When last did you hear somebody mentioning Solplaatje? When last did you hear? So all of those things are up to us to re-elevate what our grandparents, our ancestors have gifted us with. It is up to us. Nobody's going to decolonize anything. Up to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know a lot of people went to Google to go and check Ethereum. Please put the definition in the chat if you manage to get it. And just on the point of you having went to a predominantly Xhosa speaking, I just wanted to hear from the people joining us in the group. Maybe we can release a poll about that to say, who of you actually learned and started your education in your home language? Who started in the mainstream language? Maybe your mainstream language is the home language, so maybe both. or maybe you started with a different language, if you found yourself maybe geographically in a place that speaks a language that's not necessarily yours, but is not necessarily one of the mainstream. So maybe you can just let us know, just look out for the poll. But as we talk about that, I mean, Lorato, you mentioned that you write children's books. And I mean, studies have shown us that learners understand the concepts better when they are learning in a language that they have a good grasp of, you know. However, we always see this being juxtaposed with maybe the possible barriers to global participation. How if you don't learn in English, maybe you won't be able to participate in certain conversations or spaces or whatever the case might be, because people won't hear you. What do you think about this dichotomy being drawn? And is it even a true dichotomy? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that I don't understand why anyone would not want to speak in their home language, because that is the first thing that, you know, when you are a child. The one thing that I want to get is, and I'm not judging anyone, you know, the parents who want to speak, you know, English to their children. And I always say, so when they are babies, what do you do? Do you play with them in English? Do you say all these coos and ahs in English, or what happens so that, you know, when they are 2, they already speak English? Because I would just find it so difficult to speak with my baby in English. And so you know, what songs do you sing? Do you have those Xhosa songs that we sing for children, the Setswana ones, and so on? Do you do that when they are babies? Because we see all these 2-year-olds speaking English, and the parents being proud and say they don't speak isiXhosa. Please don't speak isiXhosa. They don't speak Setswana, and so on. And you know, for me, even when I write the books that I write in Setswana, I find that I have all the concepts in Setswana, so it's so easy for me to write in Setswana. And I always say to people that, you know, the books that I write for children are the books that I would have loved to read when I was growing up as a child, but I didn't read because no one wrote those kind of books that I wanted to read. So I'm writing for my younger self, and I'm also writing for the children who I think that, you know, they are going to love what I'm writing, because what I'm writing about, even that younger self of mine, it's still the same thing. We're still growing up the same way. The South Africa hasn't changed. For the culture still remains, and you know, all this, the concept. Especially when I write children's books, for me, it you know, the concept comes so easily for me in Setswana, and I think it's very, very important, you know, for writers like me and Mamtina Mhlope, because we write from a point of our cultural background. I'm not going to be able to write about something that I didn't grow up in, I don't understand. And I'm guessing that if I write something that comes from my Setswana cultural background, I know that if it goes to the Eastern Cape for a child who grew up in the Xhosa household, they will still identify with what I've written about as a Motswana person, because it resonates with them. It's not, we are not islands and so on. They still understand. It's just the language that isn't similar, but we are kind of one people, the same people. They will still know. We still know that the people who are living in farms, the same thing that happens in the Eastern Cape happens in the Northwest, in the Northern Cape for Black people and all that stuff. So it's still the same. I don't write only for Tswana children. I write for Xhosa, for Zulu, for Venda, for all those things. What I do is I write South African stories, and our children need to get those kind of South African stories and so on. So it's very important for the children, and also it's very important for them to see that somebody who comes from their background, who looks like them, write the books that they are reading. Because when I was growing up, I'm honestly telling you, I've never known or read any book that was written by a Black woman. Even when they were readers, it was always Bo Malope, the man, you know, in Setswana and so on. It was never Black women who wrote. I never saw that. So for me, this is very important, the kind of work that we are doing, that children also can identify with the authors that have written the stories, that, oh, she can actually be my mom, my aunt, my sister, and so on. So that's very important for me. And when you don't engage children in their languages, you just take so much away from them. You take so much away from them. It's like you take their whole world. away from them. If you live in a country like South Africa, where, you know, the recent stats came out that, you know, Black people make 81% of this population, and English is only like 8% of the population, and 7% Africans or 12% and so on. And then you don't want your children to learn an African language. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, even I'm Motswana, but I'm happy to learn Tsivenda, isiXhosa, isiZulu, and so on, you know, because I live in a country with all those people. I will definitely meet people who speak isiXhosa, and I would want to be able to communicate with them in a language that I would feel like it will, you know. So it's very, very important. There's so much. It's not only language. I mean, language is your culture, is your identity as well. And I have seen a lot of children who grow up speaking English being resentful that their parents didn't teach them the languages, and they will go on like, I wish my mom or my parents would have taught me isiXhosa or Setswana or Tshivenda and so on. I mean, you have parents who come from, you know, two different backgrounds language-wise, and they still speak to their children in those languages as well. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's how our country is. So it's very important for me. Also, somebody spoke about intentionality, and also I think we need to be intentional with the whole concept of teaching our children our languages and so on, because when the school says speak English, you say, well, this is my child, so I will. We grew up in Bantustans. I grew up in the former Tswana. I'm here speaking to you in English. I was taught in Setswana, but that didn't stop me from learning English.
No.
So there's nothing stopping those parents to say to the teachers there that no, they will learn English in school. I'm not speaking English at home, because I wouldn't be able to be speaking English to my child all the time at home. It sounds silly, if I may say so.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Kawa, I saw your hand was up for a while. Maybe in 30 seconds, do you want to answer to the
No, there's something Malarato had said that had excited me, but she extended the argument to where I would have wanted to go as well.
Okay.
I'm very happy.
All right, okay. So Mamtrina, what would you say is the role of language in carrying the identity of a people, and how does storytelling help this?
Thank you. I'm carrying something here.
Yes.
If I get a phone call from somebody I don't know with an angry voice, Ati, is that Mamtrina Mtrape? What is wrong with you? Mabeti, what is wrong with me? I know that Zolega is out of print. We have to reprint. When this book is out of print, I get shouted at. What is wrong with me? And Zolega comes in the Sawubona Zolega, Molo Zolega, Hi Zolega, comes in different languages, and we need to add more languages, of course.
Yes.
Zolega, we approached to SABC because we thought we can make a short film about Zolega. But no, the theme won't speak to us. So Satyazin, we're going to have to just do it as an independent short film. Zolega is just going to have to go like that. And also, when we say African languages in the modern society, there's always got to be a modern society. Long after I've gone, there's going to be another modern society and another modern society. There are things we have to carry. Can you imagine water being out of fashion, man? Imagine. But no, we don't need to drink water. It's out of fashion.
Yes.
Mother tongues will never go out of fashion.
Yes.
Storytelling will never go out of fashion. For as long as there are people here on earth, there shall be stories. Yesterday, I was part of a very beautiful webinar, and people were coming from different parts of the African continent and they were saying to us, March has been declared International World Storytelling Month. I didn't know that. Even when I declared my birthday in 2018, I turned 60 years old. I thought, I am so grown up now. I can make other unusual decisions. So when you turn 60,
Yes.
I decided my birthday, which is 24th October, shall be known as National Storytelling Day. And so every year on the 24th of October at 11 o'clock sharp, we tell stories wherever we are. Some people church, if it's a Sunday, they do it at work, they do it wherever, or at home at 11 o'clock sharp. And you know what? Botswana came on board, Zimbabwe came on board, Kenya came on board, and in Namibia, if you join, but the first country to come on board was Jamaica. Yeah, man.
Wow.
Jamaica was the first country to join us, storytellers from there. And so it is fascinating that we can put different spaces where we celebrate our languages. We are on Snow White, Swan Lake, Beanstalk. They've made into animation films. They've made them into dance productions. They've made music so that they are there forever to live.
Yes.
When I wrote Inisano Tando, the poem, somebody phoned me as soon as we finished doing the run at the Playhouse of African Mother Christmas. Immediately, somebody phoned me and he says, I'm a composer. I'd like to adapt Inisano Tando into an opera version of this poem. I said, Shona Mfanagiti Tata, you've got the skill. I don't have the skill. Somebody saw me performing Love Child. What's wrong with you? Why don't you help us to get new stories to dance to? And there was a whole dance production of Love Child, Unomlambo. Nomthunzi. It was so beautiful. When I think of that young girl from East London who was the lead actress who was acting Nomlambo, and the big drum that was designed especially for the production. Adele Blanca was the choreographer. I'm just thinking there's no stopping us. There's no stopping us. And while I have this platform, I'm begging you, Bantabasha, can we have new illustrators? How is South Africa, Mara? Where are
Don't worry,
we
we
know
are.
how to draw. Can we get young people to learn to draw? Siyashota ngama-illustrators eSouth Africa. Hambi Kenya, easy. Tanzania, easy. Uthi Uganda, easy. South Africa, uncenga. Bathi bafuna decoloniality, shame.
We actually, don't worry about that. We're actually working on that as TAQA because part of our offering is illustrations as well. So we're based on that. So we'll be reaching out with our database. Thank you very, very much. And then just maybe back to you, Thapelo. I mean, given that like our constitution mentions that everyone has the right to be taught in one's home language as far as is practicable, I think that's what it says. Do you think that this has materialized, I mean, in our schooling system and even in just the way we do business, how we interact with each other in the business space? Do you think this has been materialized, and have the merits of this right even existing been acknowledged?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is no. It has not materialized. Not a lot of people get that opportunity, except again for one particular demographic. So Afrikaans speaking people are afforded that opportunity to go from birth to matric, learning and going through life speaking Afrikaans, and then later learning English. So no one else is really afforded that opportunity in South Africa, and I think it's unfortunate. I mean, you look at Europe and how multilingual Europe is, right? You move from Germany to Spain to Italy, and everyone grows up speaking their language, and only later do they start learning a more globalized languages to properly participate and engage with other people across the world. So this idea that you won't get opportunities if you don't speak English, you won't get opportunities if you don't understand English, I think it's misleading, and it's slowing our development and progress down as a country. Let kids learn concepts, let kids learn maths, let kids get introduced to life science in languages they understand and trust, right? Because really a lot of people are first having to translate to this foreign concept, which is a foreign word, and the roots of the word themselves are completely unfamiliar. They have to first acclimatize to those roots in that language before understanding the core concept. So if you look at computer programming, for example, it's so much easier if you've got the key concepts in a particular language. It's so much easier to transfer them to any other programming language. So same goes for spoken language. Because you've got the language, get the key concepts right, and then after that you can start transferring that to other languages. It's a lot easier, right? Because the difference will only be syntax and certain things that are specific in that language. So really, I don't think it's materialized. I think we need proper investment into that space. We need intentional leaders to really drive and push that at a scale that will really make an impact and a difference. right? And these things need to move fast. We've got technology, you know, fortunately, to help us develop these things very quickly. So really, I think as a country, we need to start utilizing the tools that we've got at our disposal, and really be bold and intentional with doing this, just like you know, the rest of the world. So you travel to Asia, they don't speak English, right? The signs, everything is in their language. But in South Africa and you know, other parts of Africa, it's European language all around. So there really needs to be a big shift in that regard.
Thank you. And I'm seeing here, Bitumelo Lamola says, in Wales, all the signs in the country, from roadsides, toilet signs, all will be written in Welsh. Then at the bottom, the Welsh government did this intentionally when they realized that more of their population was losing access and exposure to Welsh. And this is very, very important. And I think it speaks to, I guess, the theme that has been sort of carrying throughout our conversation, that of intentionality. Because I mean, in 2023, UNESCO actually released a study showing that at least 40% of the languages spoken in the world are at risk of being extinct due to children being taught in their society language and not the ones that are spoken at home. And how can we then guard against the loss of our languages? Like, what can individuals do? I mean, Jane, maybe you can comment on that. What do you think individuals can do to just guard against that loss of our languages?
Yeah, sure. I think as Tapelo mentioned, one of the biggest problems is that it has become kind of an individual ownership. You know, it's become the role of individual Africans to make sure that these languages are preserved and that they're included and that they don't get lost. And there is a huge movement around it, and it's quite amazing to see. It would be nice, obviously, if there was a lot more institutionalized policy that was actually performed to make this happen. But one of the projects that we've recently been involved in as well is around the language preservation of some of the San and Khoi languages that could become extinct in the next years because people are not being taught about it, because during the colonial time it was basically eradicated. People were not even allowed to speak it to each other. And one of the ways that we do that is by digitizing this language, you know, creating these data sets that can be used by our models, by technology, to enhance, to translate, to transcribe, to take it forward, so that in a few years' time, people have access to this technology that isn't just lost. So that's one of the approaches that we take. Obviously, there are lots of different approaches, and I think the creation of storybooks and stuff in and of itself is such a great historical bank, you know, that can be used one day.
Yeah,
absolutely. Lorato, do you want to also? Oh, Tapelo, sorry, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just on what Jen is saying, I think also just including the use of language in everyday life beyond just education. It shouldn't just be something that people or kids engage with at school and at home. It's when I go to the shop, it's the stop sign, it's when I'm watching TV, even if the show is not in Setswana, but if the subtitles are in Setswana and I can read and understand in Setswana, you know, it's really in those daily experiences where I'm not necessarily in a situation where I'm somewhat forced to do it, but like it's just a normal part of everyday life.
Absolutely.
I mean, most definitely. And, you know, for me, I always say to people that when we do, you know, with the issue of language, oh, am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You know, that the whole intentionality, parents and all that. You know, I remember when we had this whole COVID thing and, you know, there was no words for COVID. There were no concept that explain what COVID is, or all that language that was coming from COVID, and there was a scramble because, you know, we didn't know what words to use when we do the translation and all that, and that was like, okay, you see now, if you don't develop a language by writing it, you will not have new concepts, because you need new concepts. A language developed by reading, by writing, by storytelling, by, you know, everything. If you're not going to be speaking the language, then it will disappear. I mean, Jen was just now talking about the San languages. I mean, everyone who is in this space will know about the story of Oma Katrina, who is now 91. And she is the only mother tongue speaker who is left in the whole world who speak her language. She's 91.
Yeah.
She doesn't have, I mean, I'm not God, but she's 91. She doesn't have much long to live and so on. But, you know, she and her language was, you know, for them, their language is that colonial times when they were not allowed to speak the language. So it's very easy for a language to die. It's not a joke. Languages can be extinct. Now, you know, in 1996, they found that there were 20 still speakers of the new language. They are all gone. It's just Oma Katrina. She cannot read, she cannot write. She's now just trying to teach the children to you know, the storytelling. And so luckily there were some linguists who designed the orthography of her language. Now it can be written. Her granddaughter can write, and, you know, David van Wyk, they can do that and so on. But that is just to show that languages can die if we don't write, if we don't read, if we are not intentional about getting our languages. And I always say, you know, when for us who write for children, it's like some people will always think that, oh, it's just playing and so on. It's good that it's playing and so on. But if you are going to be talking about decolonization and decoloniality, you are not doing it a service if you are not going to start with children's literature.
Yeah.
Because it starts there. If you are not, you are going to wait until they are at university level and so, and then you start and say, we need to decolonize. That's not going to be very useful. You need to start from the very foundation and say, how do we decolonize this and so on. And even the whole concept of academia and so on, I always say, children's literature is actually academic. Because people tend to think that, you know, with people who write for children, it's so easy. And I always say, you can ask Martin, writing for children is the most difficult form of writing. It's not easy because you need to get them from the very beginning and so on. And, you know, I saw somebody here was talking about, you know, translation, because that's the other issue that we need to, you know, when we talk about, especially in children's writing, because people think, you know, publishers have got a tendency to think that anyone who speaks the language can translate, and we've seen really, really bad translations, and it turns parents off, it turns teachers off, it turns everyone off and say, this is bad, we can't do this. We need to be able to, you know, make sure that all these people who are in this language and book business need to understand that African languages are just as good. And I always say that African languages are also good for the economy of the country. Because you have a whole workforce who speak this language. How do you not invest in the 81% of the population who speak this language and think that they must just speak English? That's not how it is. Countries that they have survived with that, China is rising, you know, with the economy, they are doing very well, and they don't speak a word of English. All these European countries, everything. I mean, when we were in Sweden, Martin, in 2022, we were told that English books in Sweden don't sell. They don't sell. The Swiss only want to read in their language. If you are going to publish a book in Sweden, or most of the English books in Sweden, they have been translated from Swedish to English. They are not originally written in English, and they still don't sell because the Swiss prefer to read in their home languages. How can we see all the science, but we need investment from everyone. We need, you know, the government, I know they are trying and so on, but it's high time that it's, you know, we should stop talking about trying. It should be done in a way that it goes beyond just trying and all that. And corporate South Africa, I think corporate South Africa has gotten away with a lot. Because, you know, they're not investing in our languages, and they should be told that African languages are good for your businesses as well. You need to invest in African languages, invest in making sure that all these books, you can't just live in a country and pretend that all these other people are not there. I mean, Professor Leroux, who's a professor of publishing at UP, University of Pretoria, does extensive research in publishing trends and so on. And she was saying that 50% of the authors who are published in this country are white males. And if you are going to be talking about access to books, and people are saying we don't have, and also relevant books. What books are white South African males writing that a child is going to resonate with? You know what I mean? If you have 50% of white male South Africans writing books and you are saying that people don't read, is that what people want to read? What white male South Africans are writing? I think not. I think not. And only 2% of books in this country, only 2% of these books for the 81% of the population are published in African languages. 2% from the 81% of the population in this country. What is that? There's no investment. There's no investment. You can't just invest, even the Afrikaans community and say that we are going to do our own thing. It's still not good. I applaud them. That's perfect. But if you're going to be living in a country that 81% of the population is that, and you think that you are going to live in a silo, and that's why, if you look at the inequality of the country, it all boils down to all these things, that we are unequal in so many ways, including the languages, how our languages are treated, and so on. So it should stop beyond just saying that the government is trying. It shouldn't be that, because for most Black people, they rely on government. So if the government, because the Afrikaners, they've got all this money, they can build their own universities, they can all do that. But our businesses and all this, we rely on government resources and what the government can do for us. So for the most part, yeah, we do. But all of us, we've got a responsibility, whether you speak that language or you don't. As much as I am invested in my language, Setswana, I want to see Xhosa children, children who speak other African languages, Zulu, Tshivenda, Sitonga, also winning. Even the 1.5% of the Isindebele people in this country are just as important as the 27% of Zulu speakers in this country.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Before I give Umam so that you Okay. But I wanted to say, as we begin to wrap up the conversation, please feel free to put questions in the chat box on the Q&A as well, so that we can see if you have any questions. I saw a lot of people already making connections in the discussion box, people that want to collaborate. So I'm happy to see that. And I think this conversation has definitely then done its job. If from here, we're not just gonna appreciate the fact that it was a good conversation, but we can actually start working with each other and collaborating going forward. So yes, please do put your questions in the chat box. Kawa, I saw your hand was also up earlier.
I think I was catching the same fire that Umagcina was catching with Dr. But I think I wanted to say, and I think Umagcina did say it a little earlier, that we really can't take it for granted. We can't take it for granted that they will survive and that they will develop and grow on their own.
Yes.
I think every day growing up in Ukula, a new generation, umchana can't speak isiXhosa, and yani they go to school and we grow up and then sharp, that's a single person lost. But we're seeing I shouldn't say lost, as in those people are lost, I don't mean it in that sense, but in the sense that with regards to people who speak, African home languages, we are genuinely in real time seeing the numbers decrease with every single generation. And I think if we aren't actively ourselves writing, if we aren't actively ourselves doing the kind of work that Lelapa and Botlale are doing, we're not actively ourselves, because we are, I very much agree with Malurato that, the government needs to do so much more for us with regards to developing the usage of African languages, of African music being primarily the one that's playing on our screens, just on the kind of cultural side of things, because that's the kind of world that shapes the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world around us. So I think primarily I just wanted to say we can't take it for granted, and it's genuinely so important, because to relinquish ourselves, and one makes us so much poorer in the sense that, njengoba sitsho uMalerato earlier, a language is more than, it's not a medium of instruction, it holds an entire world, a way of thinking, a way of being, etc. So one, you're so much richer if your only dimension is an English dimension versus what we are somewhat necessarily born with in South Africa, that we are necessarily multilingual. But I think secondly, if we relinquish ourselves and we lose languages and we aren't ourselves actively fighting for them, we in a sense we lose the ability to imagine a different world. I think part of what our languages somewhat represent right now towards the spirit is that, we live in a time that still is very much in the grip of the relics of colonialism, a world that wants to dominate our entire beings, such that we become these European beings. And I think when we lose our kind of languages and when we lose ourselves, we also relinquish the ability to imagine something outside of what is at present.
Yes.
So we have to fight in a linguistic sense, to ensure that we remain aware that there's so much more than this kind of English, Eurocentric capitalist world that we have. It's important even for our ability to imagine more, to hold the existence of our languages and to continue this. Nangona media, nangona even uhulumende, nangona so many partners are working against very often, African home languages. We need to actively resist. We can't take it for granted, is what I want to say.
Yes. No, absolutely. Someone asked in the Q&A, will there be a follow-up session to this webinar? Absolutely. I think this is the start of this conversation. So this is actually just to kickstart these types of conversations, and also just to let people know this is the work that is happening by TAQA, by Lelapa, by Botlhale, by Dr. Mamgcina. These are the stories that Lorato are writing, and we need to be keeping up with the people that are already doing the work and kind of stand behind them to ensure that the work does continue. But please do follow us on our social media pages so that you can see when we do a follow-up. We will absolutely continue the conversation online as well in the following days, just in this upcoming week, so that we can actually get different inputs as well from people who may have not been able to be a part of this conversation. And I see a lot of people saying we need more time. Yes, we do.
Yeah, we need more time. Yes.
We need more time. But everything starts with a single step. And I think this was our single step. And we thank you so much for joining in. There aren't a lot of questions, but I saw a lot of people were commenting and agreeing with what our speakers were saying. I mean, to talk about that, it's quite scary that a bulk of the published authors are white men. I mean, then it's a scary number of people who are being left out at the level of ideas. So you can just imagine how many ideas we are losing out. That was a comment from Boanika that he shared around that, to say how many ideas are we losing out on. And yeah, I think Melerato, please consider a foundation for us consumers to donate, and the foundation uses the funds to print ECD books before grade 1. So there are a lot of people that are also willing to participate with their pockets, and I think that's also important. As we are saying, we need to do more. The government also needs to do more. I think even in our individual capacity, just even if you identify a child, buy them 5 books. That's all. You don't need to make it a lifetime partnership, or we definitely also need to be that intentional in growing our own home languages. So a lot of people sharing contact details there. And yeah, Enoch, I see a Chitsonga International Award-winning author. Thank you so much for joining us from and we will definitely be reaching out to you in terms of collaborating. Please just leave your contacts. Okay, I see you already left your contacts in the chat below. And yes, Sis Namsha, when you learn a language, you learn the culture. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I think it speaks to the fact that language is a carrier of culture. It's not a medium of instruction, but it is a carrier of culture. So thank you so much to everyone. Please look out on our social media pages as we continue this conversation. We will be putting out some questions there for you to actually contribute and for the conversation to actually continue. I just also want to especially thank our guests. Our guests here. I mean, this was, like I said, like a first step that TAQA was doing. And to really have some heavyweights as yourself joining us on this journey, in this conversation, we really do appreciate it. And to just show our token of appreciation, we will be gifting each guest with a voucher of Book Circle Capital. It's actually a Black-owned bookshop in Melville. They also do deliver if you're not around the area. But I think this is also our way of saying we are committed to contributing to the growth of African languages, of African authors, of African-owned bookstores as well that do promote the same as well. So please, we hope you get some interesting African books from the store, and you can look at it as sort of a memoir from this sort of a memory from this event that we had as TAQA. Thank you so much to everyone that joined. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for
Bye-bye.
this.
Bye. Thank
Thank you
you.
for this.
All the best.
TAQA. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Oh, now they're having lots of questions.
So